Relationship advice. Update. I think my sister-in-law's best friend is trying to get with my husband and she's encouraging it. Am I delusional? My sister-in-law, 23 female, is my husband's, 28 male, half-sister. She was the product of their mother's infidelity. His father divorced their mother when he was 12, after he found out through a paternity test she wasn't his. My father-in-law refused to have anything to do with my sister-in-law, but continued to have a relationship with my husband. Because of this, my sister-in-law is very clingy to my husband. My husband is also very protective of his sister, and generally doesn't tolerate anything negative being said about her, which is why I'm posting this here before mentioning anything to him. My husband and I bought a house last year, which has its own indoor swimming pool. My sister-in-law was super excited when she saw it and asked if she could use it sometimes with her friend. We said it was fine, as long as she gave us a notice before she turned up. Her and her friend, Chloe, have used it many times before, but almost never when my husband is home. He is a lawyer and works long hours. With lockdown, my husband has started to work from home. My sister-in-law asked me if she and Chloe could come over and use the pool. I told her I was uncomfortable with them coming over as I'm pregnant, and don't want to accidentally expose the baby to anything risky. My sister-in-law then asked if she and Chloe quarantined for 2 weeks would they be able to come over. My husband said it was fine. 2 weeks later, they turn up to my house. My husband was in his office, so they go straight to the pool after making small talk. My husband ends up coming out after an hour, and we're hanging out in the kitchen. My sister-in-law walks in to get a drink and she starts talking to my husband. Before she goes back to the pool, she says, "Chloe's going to be so happy to see you." It was weird because my husband and Chloe aren't close. Chloe comes into the kitchen 2 minutes later and spends the rest of her time talking to my husband, until he excuses himself to get back to work. She's super giggly and smiley when she talks to him. He would say something sarcastic and she would laugh like it was the funniest joke she's ever heard. It honestly felt like she was flirting with him. Before she went back to the pool, she gave me this weird smirky look. Before they leave, they ask my husband if he's working from home every day of the week. He confirms he is. The next 2 weeks, they come over to the house to swim, every single day. Except, Chloe never gets in the water. Instead she hangs around the house in her bikini. She was previously wearing a one-piece if it makes a difference, every single day. Whenever my husband comes out to hang around me, she quickly interrupts him, and keeps him talking until he has to go back to work. I made lunch for us all, and when I excused myself to call my husband down, my sister-in-law quickly stopped me and said Chloe could call him for me. They shared a look and Chloe looked really happy when she went to get him. Chloe has also started to get touchier with my husband. She's put her hands on his chest and arms, stands or sits really close to him. To my husband's credit, he does usually create space between them whenever she does something like this. The reason I believe my sister-in-law is in on this, is because she's made a few pregnancy-related jabs at me recently. She told me a story about how one of her friend's boyfriends was cheating on her and then said something along the lines of, "Did you know a lot of men start cheating when their wives are pregnant?" She's also made comments about how I look chubby now, and it looks weird next to my husband because he's well built. If she spots my husband out of the office, she quickly goes to inform Chloe. I know pregnancy hormones can mess with a person's brain, so I'm wondering if I'm just looking for something that isn't there. My sister-in-law sent me a text yesterday asking if they could come over to swim next week, and I really want to say no, but I know she'll whine to my husband if I do. I ideally want to have a conversation with him before then, but I'm not sure if I should mention the flirting. Am I being delusional? Now for the top advice. Nah girl. Nip it in the bud right now. You know what you see and hear. You see the looks between the two, you see her touching him and flirting with him. They only decided to come over every day, after they found out that your husband will be there every day. When you bring up this whole thing, don't blame the sister-in-law. Completely blame Chloe. Don't say anything bad about SIL. Let your husband know that you appreciate him creating some distance between him and Chloe, but that you'd like more distance or less talking/touching between them. Or ask him what he wants to do about it. Also let your husband know that the pregnancy is making you insecure, and that they keep making jabs at how big you're getting. You married him for a reason, I'm sure he will understand. If you talk about how Chloe is the issue, it shouldn't bring up any issues with sister-in-law. Also, I would stop telling them what you're going to do regarding your husband. Stop saying, "I'll go get husband," because that's when sister-in-law steps in and says Chloe will get him. Or, "I'll just bring this to husband," because Chloe will bring it to him instead. If you're going to get him for lunch, then just go get him. If you're going to bring something for him, then just do it. Don't give them a chance to take over and get alone time with him. Good luck. I'm sure your husband will understand and set some boundaries with her. Get rid of them. They're definitely flirting and they're coming around way too much and monopolizing any free time your husband has. You should talk to your husband. Hopefully, he's also feeling uncomfortable with the interactions. Hard agree. I'd open by leading with curiosity, asking if he's noticed anything about Chloe's behavior. Segue that into a conversation about the comments Chloe has been making about OP, and then talk about banning Chloe from the house. Leave the sister out of it as much as possible. If husband has a pretty strong defense reflex about his sister, he's literally not going to see it, unless it's dancing in front of him. Chloe is doing really obvious boundary violation stuff, but sister is a lot harder to nail down, to the point that she could be encouraging her friend to enjoy her crush, rather than start a full-blown affair. Not that that's cool either. Start with the obvious thing, and go from there. At least, that's this unmarried Redditor's 2 cents. Be direct with your husband. His pregnant wife's feelings should come before some friend of his sister. And she has no business putting her hands on him, ever. She has crossed the line. Plus, if she stopped swimming, then why is she even coming over anymore? She wants to get with her husband and her sister-in-law is in on it. Now for the update. Well, I read and reread all of the comments on the original post to try and figure out how I was going to bring up the issue. Turns out, I didn't have to. We were watching a movie and my phone lit up with another text from my sister-in-law telling me she was now going to be here at 1 p.m. the next day to swim with Chloe. My husband saw it and told me to tell her not to come. This is really weird behavior for my husband, because he tends to do anything to accommodate my sister-in-law and very rarely refuses her anything. I asked him if something had happened, and he shrugged it off and we kept watching the movie. A few minutes later he paused the movie and said he wanted to ask me a question. He asked if I'd noticed Chloe never swam when she came to our house. I wish I could say I was calm and collected like the comments were advising, but I ended up laughing hysterically. I was honestly just so relieved he'd brought it up, instead of me having to be the one to do it. I think my husband thought I was losing my mind. When I finally stopped laughing, he repeated the question, and said he wanted a serious answer. I said, "Of course I've noticed," and he awkwardly replied, "So? You must have noticed the other things too." To summarize, the conversation that followed, my husband hadn't noticed Chloe was flirting with him the first few days because he was so busy with work, he wasn't really paying attention to anything else. He said when she started getting handsy, is when he suddenly had the light bulb moment that she was into him. He says he didn't want to unnecessarily stress me out, so he never mentioned anything, but he was worried I'd noticed too and thought he was interested, because he hadn't immediately shut it down. He realized we would eventually have to have this talk, but he wasn't sure how to bring it up. Oh, the irony. He did privately speak to Chloe, and told her he was happily married and wasn't interested in starting anything with anyone else. Apparently, she never took him seriously because she kept doing it. In the end, he called his sister on Sunday to tell her, either she got her to stop, or Chloe couldn't come over anymore. His sister ended up having a tantrum and said a few nasty things about me / the baby / our relationship. She insisted I was somehow behind his request, and made some comments about how I was controlling and insecure, because I looked like a beach whale and Chloe was younger and hotter. He was pretty pissed at this, and said if she said something like that about me again, he would stop speaking to her. She claimed I had baby trapped him, and when my husband pointed out we were already married so I didn't need to trap him, and that he was the one who wanted to start a family, she kept insisting I had manipulated him into feeling that way. She claimed he was unhappy in our relationship, and he always looked tired because I was forcing him to slave away to fund my fancy lifestyle, whilst I sat on my butt all day. He pointed out he chose to be a lawyer knowing he would have to work long hours, and I had only recently left my job, so her accusations were baseless. She said some other stuff along the same lines, but the thing that made my husband finally snap was when she said the baby was already ruining everything, and it was just going to get worse when it was born and he should have dragged me to the termination clinic whilst he had the chance. He told her neither her nor Chloe were welcome in our home anymore, until they apologized for how they'd been behaving and for the things my sister-in-law said. He said he wasn't sure he could ever forgive or forget what she'd said about our child even if she did apologize, and he couldn't believe she would even think something like that, let alone say it. Apparently, she started crying and said she was sorry, that she didn't mean it and she was just scared to lose him, and that she wasn't thinking clearly. He hung up on her. He showed me his phone and she's been calling him and texting him since, begging him to reply. He asked if she'd said anything to me. I was debating whether to say anything or not, but he kept insisting he knew she had said something, and he wanted to know what it was. I told him the things I mentioned in the original post and a few other things she had said. He asked me why I never mentioned anything when she first said it, and I mentioned how he got really defensive whenever I said anything even slightly negative about his sister, and he got defensive. I pointed out he was doing it again, and after some back and forth, he admitted that maybe he was a little bit defensive when it came to her, but he promised to stop, and he wanted to make sure we could talk about anything, including his sister. He ended up mentioning wanting to try couples counseling. He said it wasn't because he thought there was something wrong with our relationship, but apparently, he has been speaking to his dad a lot recently, and he mentioned one thing he regretted about his marriage with mother-in-law, is that they never went to therapy until the cracks in their relationship were too big. In his current marriage they go, and it's helped him avoid the mistakes of his first marriage. I agreed, so we're probably going to try that soon. My husband thinks my sister-in-law will eventually turn up even if we tell her not to, but he promised he'd deal with her if she does. So, Reddit, I guess you were right. I really did just need to speak to him. Thanks for the advice and comments, I enjoyed reading them all. Now for the closing comments. I love a good update, your husband's a keeper. Good on both of you. So happy it all worked out. Love you, and your baby, and your husband who is willing to stick up for you and himself and your baby. It sounds like sister-in-law may be jealous of the baby, and that's a bigger issue than Chloe. Sister-in-law is needy and the baby is going to take priority over her. Chloe is just a distraction and a tool to get him away from OP and baby. I bet there will be a lot more need to stick up for the baby in the future. Chloe and your sister-in-law sound massively trashy. For real. I chuckled at, it's because Chloe's younger, though. They're 23 and 25. Big freaking whoop. I don't know why, but I feel like you guys need to get a Ring doorbell or a security camera system in place. Yes, if they don't, I believe they will go home one day to see his sister and her friend chilling in the house with a broken door lock. This is a good update. A couple communicating honestly that solves a problem and going to therapy for a check-in to help them facilitate better communication in the future. You love to see it. Wishing you and your husband the best, and I hope this means a little less stress for you during your pregnancy. It seems like most conflict in life either stems from or is furthered by lack of communication or dishonesty. Honestly, I feel like if people would just communicate and be straight up with others, the majority of interpersonal conflicts could be avoided entirely. Even touchy stuff, like how the husband suggested marriage counseling. A lot of people would be worried like, oh, is he trying to say our marriage has problems? But when you just simply say what you mean and are honest with people, you'll find that usually they're thinking the same thing you are. And that's it for this video, guys. If you have thoughts to share, leave a comment below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you like this content. I'll catch you in the next one. Good day everyone.